What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over hit-scan weapons versus projectile weapons. So in the series so far we have done projectile weapons. We click to shoot and a bullet comes out, and if it hits our opponent, they take damage. I know it doesn't quite line up with where our reticle is, but really that's just an issue with us not changing the reticle at all from the center of the screen and us not lining the weapon up with it. However, what we can do, if we want a very, very precise and we don't want a lot of physics to be involved, we can use something called Hitscan. So specifically, I'm thinking of like the Halo sniper, where if you shoot and say you're right over their head, then they will instantly get shot, regardless of distance. There's no drop off, anything like that. And so that's a Hitscan weapon. Basically, if they were in the area that you were shooting, when you shot, then they will take the damage or get killed, you know, whatever it is that happens. So in this case, if we want to have a hit scan weapon, I do this using a raycast. This is the standard and pretty much the only way that you'll see it be done in games is you click and it instantly draws a line from the point that you're at to, you know, a certain distance away. You could technically do as close to infinity as you wanted if you wanted to go on forever and ever, but you may want to limit it to a distance. But you can see as soon as I shoot, and again, the reticle is a little bit off for the reasons I explained earlier, this line comes out. There's actually no travel time. It draws as soon as it can, and if it hits, we deal damage. We can still calculate body shots and headshots this way. So you can see this is a body shot, only did that much damage. This is a headshot, killed the opponent. I left these lines to draw permanently so that you could see them. And it also works with aim down sights. So this is hit scan as opposed to projectile. We're going to cover supporting both so you can change it per weapon, because some weapons should have projectiles and some should have hit scan. Well, depending on your game, you may have only one type used in your game. However, you could have a mix, like such as a rocket launcher. It's an explosive. It should definitely shoot a rocket. It should not be a hit scan. However, something like the sniper, you may want to be a hit scan. Okay, so it's actually not too bad. It's a pretty fun episode, and I don't think it's going to give us too much trouble. So let's take a look and see what we've got here. So if you go to the code, and before we get started, just so you are aware, I believe this is episode 23 or 24 of the first-person shooter tutorial series, maybe even 25 at this point. Sometimes I lose track with how many episodes we do. If you'd like to get caught up in everything we've done to get to this point, then feel free to click this iCard in the top right corner, which will lead you to the entire playlist of all the episodes. I'll also link this episode right here, which is where we covered the projectile bullets, you know, spawning them, creating them, launching them. We're going to do a little bit more with them today, but really just separating which weapons fire what. All right. And like I said, if you go into your code and go to our base weapon.h. So I've added another enum. I know we have two in here already. We had the weapon type to determine, you know, what type of weapon it was, like assault rifle, pistol, submachine gun. And then we had the weapon mode for single burst and auto. I'm having something called fire type now. I made this new enum, and I call it projectile or hit scan. You could potentially have others, like if you want your base weapon to truly cover everything, you should probably have a melee as well. You might even want like explosive or tactical. Like you could consider things weapons that don't necessarily fire the same as, you know, standard weapons. Maybe you shoot something and it's actually a grenade that comes out and you want grenade logic, something like that. So you could you know, add as many as you want here. We'll probably be adding more to it as we go, but all we care about for now are projectile and hit scan. So go ahead and create this enum and make a variable of that enum type. So I've just called it fire type. Make sure it does have this U property line above it, because we are going to be setting the default values on the classes themselves in the blueprints. And then in the base weapon CPP, in the constructor, make sure you set the fire type to a default value. Technically, you don't have to. It will default to this, but there you go. Okay, and then we can go back into our engine. And what we really need to do today is we need to be able to spawn this line deal our damage, and then theoretically remove it. And, you know, the line won't be visible at the end. This is just for us for debugging and so you can see it. So I'm going to go to my base weapon, BP, and I'm also going to go to my base character, BP. If I could remember where everything is at. And lastly, I'm going to open up my base enemy, BP. There we go. So we got these 3 blueprints up. Okay, so in event fire weapon, this is what we had previously. If you go to your base weapon BP, event fire weapon, this was all that was in it and all that you'll probably have right now. You may have different types of ammo here because the way this works is we were checking the type of weapon that it was, grabbing the correct location to spawn the projectile from, and then spawning the correct class. I happen to only be using the assault rifle ammo at this point, so I only have that one node, but that doesn't really matter here. What I've done now is I've added our fire type enum here. Get fire type. And I've just done a switch on it. Okay, projectile and hit scan. Now, if it's projectile, I do the logic that we were already doing because we were always using projectile bullets and ammo. But we may want to do hit scan now. So if it's hit scan, we have to do things slightly differently. So what I do now is I basically have to get the point from the center of our camera and then a given distance to where we are looking to determine where the hit scan should be. It should be where the camera is looking from the center of it, and it should draw a line to the angle that we are looking at. So it's actually not too bad in terms of logic. It might be a little bit weird the first time you see it, but I'll go over it. So first of all, we're going to need 2 things. We're going to need the camera from the character, and we're going to need to know if they're aiming down sights or not. If you don't have a check for aim down sights, and we use different cameras, then you're going to not actually be able to hit scan from the right location when aiming down sights. So, simple way we do this here is we're going to get the owner of this weapon, and we're going to have to set this weapon to be owned by the character, and then we're going to get the details from it. First things first, get owner. Right now, your weapon probably doesn't have an owner. So if you tried to play it, it won't do anything. I'm going to write the code underneath of it, and you can follow along. So we're going to cast to our character. You could do your code class or your blueprint class. It doesn't really matter. I'm doing the blueprint class in this case. And then I'm going to grab is aim down sights, just like this. All right, because this will determine what camera it is we have to draw the raycast from. Okay, it's that simple. That's all the logic I have here. I also drag off and get my first person camera. Just like that. Our weapon also has an ADS camera, or aim down sights camera. Remember, it's a camera that we put in to show where the aim down sights would be for each weapon. Now for this one, it's, you know, going into this little scope thing, and it doesn't actually do anything. You can't really see it. So I'll move it up for the purposes of this, but it's going to end up making it shoot higher due to that. So keep that in mind. Anyway, once we do this, what we need to do is make a function to spawn our line and, you know, create it, let it stay alive for as long as we want it to, and then get rid of it. So I've created a new function called create ray trace right here. You can add a new function to your base weapon BP by clicking this. As soon as it opens up, you'll get this function start node here. And you'll want to call this create ray trace or something like that. Basically, the ray trace is just the fancy word for we're creating a ray. You know, just like a line. It's a ray. It has one endpoint, and then the other one can go on for as long as the distance is. So we're basically going to create a ray trace from our camera to the location we want to hit, as I said earlier. And so it's very simple, actually. This is the standard procedure you'll see for pretty much all hit scans in all games. So we need our camera component. We need to know which one it is that we're grabbing this from. Remember, it changes depending on if we're aiming down sights or not. So you can see that I have the first person camera dragging into this create create ray trace if we are not aim down sights, but the aim down sights camera is the one passing into the create ray trace if we are aim down sights. So on the create ray trace function, I've added an input parameter by clicking this button here, called it camera component ref, and I've quite literally looked up camera component and grabbed an object reference. Then we can pass in these camera component object references into that. And this function can do all the work for us just based off of that parameter. All right. And we're going to do the same thing for each one. Again, like I said, for all cases, hit scans are pretty much the same deal. So we're going to get the world location. And again, we can do this together. I'll do it underneath. Get world location. And I'm going to get world rotation off of our camera component reference. Now, what we need to do is determine where we are actually looking. So we have the rotation of the camera, but we need to know what direction this raycast has to be drawn in, which is what get forward vector is for. Very simple. It basically just gets the rotation and returns a vector that is the forward direction based on its rotation. So we know exactly where to draw it from. Then we need to give it a distance because right now I believe it starts out as all ones. It might be all zeros, but regardless, it's going to be very, very tiny. And so you're not going to really be able to have any distance. So you can just do vector times float here. And you can give it a value. A lot of people like to use as a start like 500. I think that's too short. I made mine a little overly large just as an example. You can probably do about 1,000 or so and check it. And all we need to do is take our world location and add this vector plus vector. Add these together. And that will get where the line is going to end. The world location that we initially got is the camera component, which is the start. We're going from the camera to this spot. So we're going to grab this node called line trace by channel. This is the start. This is the end. Now, I made mine visible and persistent so you could see it, but since you already know what it looks like now, I'm going to change this to for duration. And I'm going to open this up and I'm going to draw it for 3 seconds. Now, before we go farther, let's see that in action. And if we have our hit scan weapon, we can aim at this guy. Boom. And enable disappear after 3 seconds. And that's even way too long. I mean, again, you won't actually see this. This is just a debug technique. We do want to create the line, but we're not going to make it actually visible because, you know, it would look ugly in the game like that. Here you go. Now, this line trace by channel has a bunch of stuff that you can actually do with it, not only on the node, but also on these values here. So it has this out hit, and what it does is when a hit occurs on that on that raycast, then it will be able to tell you what actor it was, what component it was, what object it was, all this stuff about it. And that's exactly what we want to do. Before in our base enemy BP, we were doing this right here, where we were seeing if a component overlapped with these ammo types, our base ammo, and then taking damage. So we were quite literally checking if the weak point hurt box, which is where our headshot would be, or our collision box, where our body is, would be hit by this projectile or not. And we're doing a similar thing here. This has a hit result, so you drag off of this and type break. You will break the hit result, and you'll get this big node. It might look like this initially. You can open it up by clicking the down arrow. And we need 2 things if we still want to keep our headshot and body shot, or weak point and standard hit logic. So the way we do that is we check the hit actor and we cast it to whatever type of enemy we want. In this case, I wanted base enemy BP so that any enemy can have this check done on them. Off of the base enemy BP, I grab the weak point hurt box, which is something we set up in the previous episode. Again, they're invisible now, but it's basically just a square that it goes around the head. That's the weak point for this enemy. And then the collision box goes around their body. If you're using the mesh, that's also perfectly fine. Okay, and then I check if the weak point hurt box is equal to this hit component. Because not only can it tell you the actor, I only do it, I cast the actor so that I can grab the component and so that we don't waste time trying to do calculations on objects that don't need it. Like if we hit the wall, we don't want to check if it's the weak point for the wall. Well, maybe you do, but in this case I don't. So I grabbed the weak point hurt box, as you see up there, and then if you drag off of this and just type equal equal, it'll say object, and then you can drag hit component in. Okay, and then I bring that to a branch, and right now, since our weapons and our bullets actually don't have damage, believe it or not, I just do an arbitrary value, but once we set this up, we'll hook it up to work with, you know, this weapon's damage or the projectile that it's using's damage. Okay, and that's all we actually have to do to create the ray trace. Just make sure you are calling them after you made the function. However, if you try and play it now, you won't actually be able to hurt your opponent in any way, and that's because we can cast the ray all we want, but it won't collide with this object with the collision settings that we currently have. And also, we still have to set the owner of the weapon. Remember that. So let's fix up both of these issues now. So if we go to our base enemy BP, this guy right here, and let's look at some things. So first of all, my health bar, my 3D health bar, actually had collision that was getting hit from time to time and blocking shots. So, you know, if you want to avoid that, like I do, because I don't want that to actually, you know, block shots, it's silly. What I did is I changed the collision. I think it was on overlap all dynamic or something, or perhaps block all. It might have been on UI by default. To be honest, I can't really remember, but it doesn't really matter. All we need to do is specifically these trace responses. Remember, it's called a line trace or a ray trace. So what we want to do is change the block trace on visibility to overlap. If we do that, then it won't take any collision, even if the ray trace hits it. And if you can't change it, this is all grayed out. Change your collision presets from whatever it was to custom, and then you can have free reign. If you want to see all of mine, I haven't changed any of them other than the trace response visibility, but if you want to set it up, or for whatever reason, if you had changed them, then there you go. That's what I've got. All right. On top of that, though, we have to fix up the collision for these guys. So the way they work with the traces also has to be adjusted. So both the collision and our weak point hurt box are going to be the same here. But I've changed the collision presets from overlap all to custom. And for the trace response visibility, this is where I block. So this collision box, and I'll make it visible for you for a second. It's literally just a square attached to the character. That collision box is going to block line traces. And then same with the weak point hurt box. It just blocks line traces, and it looks like this. Okay. The last thing that we are missing is the ownership of the weapon. One of our very first nodes here for the Hitscan stuff is going to fail out because the weapon is not owned by the character yet. We haven't had a need to do that, and thus I've never done it. However, now we do, because we do want to make sure that it's the owner of this weapon that we're grabbing their camera. Okay, so if you go to your base character BP, I do it in two places, specifically in begin play, because I do attach a weapon by default. If you're not attaching a weapon by default to your character, you don't have to do it in begin play. But since I am, I do it here. So it's literally just these two nodes at the end, but I have a bunch of reroute nodes to make this a little bit cleaner. So it goes from, we have this weapons array, and we add the weapon that we spawn and attach it to our character. All right, so that's there. We spawn the weapon, and we add it to our weapons array, and we attach it to our character. Once it's attached, then I go ahead and I grab that same thing that we were bringing into the weapons array that we brought into the target of attach actor to component. I bring it down, and I drag, and this is actually what I'm dragging off of and typing set owner. And then for the new owner, I want self. So if you just type self, get a reference to self, there you go. That means that this weapon that we spawned, it will have an owner of self, which we are in the base character BP class, so this character will be the owner. Now, we also have to do that when we switch weapons or pick up a weapon, because, you know, if we drop a weapon, we'll also have to get rid of being an owner, but ownership can change. It's not just owner because we're in begin play. And so in my interact, this is where I see if we're in line with the pickup collider, and then I add this weapon to our array, make sure that it's not already there or that we can't actually use it for whatever reason, and I try to switch to it. Once I switch to it, then I set the owner to self again. So you can see this is the base weapon BP. This is the thing that I'm adding to the weapons array. I keep bringing it, and I call set owner, and I set owner with self. All right, and at that point, your hit scan and projectile weapons actually should work, but we do have to make sure that we set the weapons to be the type that we want. Otherwise, nothing will actually happen, or really, they'll just keep doing the projectile stuff that they were doing. So if you go to your weapons, your individual ones, my base weapon BP is a projectile. I did make my assault rifle BP a hit scan. So just change your file type right here in the class defaults. If you have the full blueprint editor open, you just click class defaults, and then right here. And then you can see for the submachine gun, I left it as projectile. You don't need any of this in here. That's just extra. I was just showing you the class defaults. But there you go. So after you do that, then you should be able to go into your game, you know, shoot your projectiles as you would, pick up a hit scan weapon, and shoot. And if I could hit, that would be great. I can barrel stuff if I want. And we're good to go. So those are two different types of weapons. There will be more that we do to them, like such as we may want to have paths. So we may want them to fall over time and different things like that. We can get more advanced with it. But this is the actual logic for hit scan weapons and projectile weapons. This is how you can support them both in your game. Again, we can get more advanced later, but that's all I want to show you for today. So anyway, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really, really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to the YouTube membership and Patreon supporters that keep supporting me and keep allowing me to be excited to put out a video every week. I thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I really, really appreciate it. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of the tutorials I have, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and I'd be happy to help you out with any of the problems that you ran into. And like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.